be answered about whether this is a legitimate release of information or not. So we don't have the original files. We don't know why they cooked up this deal with these major newspapers who typically don't work together like this. And there you have it.
Well, I think you've crystallized it well there. And I had noticed that they'd always had digital signatures before. I had noticed that they'd always given it to the public first. And so a lot of things are changing. And I noticed the last few months the media normally tries to ignore what WikiLeaks is doing. They've hyped to pique our interest this data dump that now took place. And we've seen Karl Rove and others famously inject fake documents, say, into George W. Bush's Texas National Air Guard record as a way to try to poison the well to discredit future documents that come out. But we saw them indict the Army officer that gave WikiLeaks the video of the Apaches shooting the kids and the Reuters reporters. So I agree with you that this whole thing needs to be examined, and we don't know what's really happening, but this is unorthodox for WikiLeaks.
It is. And so I'd like to hear Wayne's view on this. He's an expert in this kind of thing. So disinformation is big business right now in digital form because it's so easy to do. And that I'm surprised that WikiLeaks didn't account for itself more. And my suspicion is they needed the cover of these major newspapers for this data, that they didn't have the confidence to go out on its own as it usually does. So they've somehow managed to induce these major newspapers to play this role. And I'm saying, well, that's rather shrewd. That's pretty good, because it's actually not easy to snooker these people. And by the way, one of the things that happens, once you get this kind of coverage in major newspapers, it's very hard to go back and get people to look at the original documents, which are tedious, hard to read, takes forever. So the newspaper version starts to prevail, and it gets a life of its own. Now, we know this has happened several times in connection with the Obama administration, where a news report has taken on a life of its own, and it's very hard to correct it. And so we're very surprised that for example, the White House has issued this statement by General Jones. However, DOD has issued no statement, says we're studying the documents. We have no statement to make. So they don't know if they're legitimate or not, because of course, one of the things that they've done, they've initiated disinformation campaigns using cyber world. They have a whole new command to do that, and so they know they're pumping out false information themselves. And so one of the things that's now starting to happen in cyber world is something called blowback, where your own attack come back to haunt you. And we know that they've been going after Pakistan with disinformation campaigns. And so we would like to see what they're going to do. Now, notice that Pakistan and Afghanistan are saying, what's going on here? And so they're suspicious that this is an actually orchestrated campaign. I don't want to add fire to the attacks on WikiLeaks. We happen to think that they're doing their best, but we also know that governments are immensely resourceful and using all sorts of outlets to get their message out.
Well, I did notice that the New York Times is able to cherry pick from the 92,000 documents and say, oh, look, there's evidence in these that Pakistan is helping the Taliban right as the news is announced that U.S. forces, special forces, are on the ground. Just a few months ago, the Pentagon lied and said, we have no forces in Pakistan. Now we know they're lying about that if these documents are authentic, and so it's pointing the finger at Pakistan.
Yep, and as you know, that's a long-running campaign right now. Listen, it's all fair. This is what war is about. You mount these disinformation campaigns as part of your on-the-ground campaigns. And the Internet is a favorite way to do this these days. That's why we've grown a little bit cautious about stuff we receive. There's so much of this phony information going out in digital form.
Well, I mean, here's an example. Here's an example. When I got the MIAC report from a police officer, and then from another federal officer, I got a Homeland Security report, I called the phone numbers on it. And I did data searches and found out that that was an FBI office I was about to call. I called. The person said, who gave this to you? Let me put you to my superior. And I kind of flummoxed them, and they said, yeah, that's real. You're not supposed to have that. And plus, I'd already seen previous documents they'd put out that had been released and declassified in decades before. And I knew it was ADL, Southern Poverty Law Center. I could even search whole paragraphs and find it in ADL, Southern Poverty Law Center reports. So I went on air and I said it was real, and they later came out and had a congressional investigation. They had a state house investigation and confirmed they were real. But so many documents I get, I just say, delete that out of the inbox. There's no way to find the provenance of that. And again, I don't have a big crew, and I'm pretty much the only person I trust, because my butt's on the line to be able to go forward with stuff. So most stuff I've been sent goes right in the shredder or gets deleted just because, absolutely. Because most of the stuff I get sent is disinfo.
Yep. Well, your term provenance is a good one because, in many fields, this is crucial to figure out whether something's fraudulent or not, is to have a traceable provenance. And in the digital world, this is extremely difficult to do. But it turns out, Alex, you probably know, and Wayne can talk more about this, there are tactical means to trace a digital document below what most people have access to. There are spores and clues that are left in that unless it's very thoroughly sanitized by professionals. And
in fact, all computers put secret codes in the text. Printers put secret code in the text. And then every time the computer makers and printer makers get caught, they go, oh, it's an accident. But no, they've got a data stream in all of this.
Well, here's one of the technical things, and I'm not an expert, is that everything that goes over the Internet, as you know, is broken into packets and then reassembled. An expert can trace those packets backward because that's how the system is able to reassemble the packets. And it's a well-known spy technique to trace through this packet route, not the entire file, but the packets contain the code for their reassembly at the receiving end. So unless you sanitize it very carefully, if something's going over the Internet, an expert can go right back to the source. Now, that's not well known because these people capable of doing that want to keep it secret.
Well, the best way to do it is from a computer that you didn't buy from a store, and then to pull up outside of a coffee shop, jack into their network and use something like a Gmail account, because then there's almost no way for them to track it back.
Depends. And I don't want to sound too mysterious here, but I'm saying, well, the technology is pretty far advanced. So a lot of the stuff that we read in the newspaper about capabilities is not all there is to it. Only because how to do this is so valuable is that it's just not going to come out. And so one of the things one of our critiques of WikiLeaks is that they're blowing sunshine about the protection they offer their sources. I happen to have looked at their site a lot and watched it over the years, and it's completely leaky. Their site is a consumer-grade snake oil about protection. Julian Assange, who's very skilled in this, probably knows that. The thing is that only a person who's been at this for several years knows what's wrong with it. But so I call it a consumer-grade protection. But it's not something that would ever keep an expert from getting into their stuff and tracing it. But experts never tell you what they're doing because that's too valuable to keep it to themselves. And so WikiLeaks now, it's quite possible that WikiLeaks has another site that they handle very sensitive stuff. And this consumer grade is just for consumer stuff. And that, as you know, intelligence agencies have multiple ways they move communication, including all the phony ways. So one of the things I'm intrigued with WikiLeaks is whether they actually think that their site, because they have page after page after page of the ways that they protect people. And that's the usual sign of snake oil, actually. You're over-promising. And I don't know why they're doing that, actually. Because it doesn't make sense to security experts to go on at length this way, because it's a sure sign of deception.
Well, the Army officer that reportedly gave him that video, he didn't get protected too well, but the word is he shot his mouth off.
Well, you often see those stories. It's what I call the lost laptop story. It's called a misleading story about how it happened. And so there are a number of subterfuges out to cover up how people are actually traced. And some of them you say, my God, how could they have been so stupid? So how did someone get drunk in a bar and lose a laptop? And so lost laptops are something of a joke as a reason for orchestrated leaks. So we actually don't know yet. By the way, WikiLeaks is aware of this. They're cautious about the reality of the Bradley Manning ploy. And so that they've never owned up that this is a legitimate story.
Well, we can also get a bird's eye view into what's really happening here by the way the media responds, analyzing the way they're putting these reports out, the angles they're going with this story. At your preliminary investigation, at your gut level, from decades of researching this, Mr. Young, what do you think is really going on here?
A willing suspension of disbelief. That many of these reporters are not technically adept about about information security, and they so much want a heroic person like Assange that he's just working them like Madoff does. So there's I call it media entertainment. He's a very entertaining guy. And
now, wait a minute. First, you're saying you think they're trying to do a good job and you don't want to bash him, and now you're comparing him to Madoff.
Well, I'm saying is that he's doing a good job of promotion of WikiLeaks. He's media savvy. He's a very photogenic guy. He's a good performer. He's got a side that looks very appealing to someone who's not very technically adept.